Good evening, everyone. We have a great blessing through this challenge of COVID in that we are able to have an incredible lineup of sports superstars and people with inside knowledge joining us for a conversation sponsored by the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. And people from all over the globe have logged on to join us, and I want to thank you so much for doing so. My name is David Seth Kirshner. I have the great honor of being the Rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in close to New Jersey, where almost every single one of these participants, these panelists, are members of our congregation. But don't you fret, Tracy Wolfson. We have an honorary membership being offered to you. It's on its way. It's being driven over before the end of the panel tonight. You will be a member of Temple Emmanuel also, so it's good to have you.
I am ready.
Good. In addition to wearing the yarmulke of being a rabbi at Temple Emmanuel, I also am involved in the greater community, and I am so honored to be involved in the amazing and holy work that the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey has always been doing, but especially is doing during this pandemic of COVID. They have really risen to the challenging occasion, and they have met needs wherever they exist, from feeding the people who are hungry to providing medical support, and the list goes on and on. Federation can always be trusted and counted on to help people. And we're honored to be part of a community that has our federation and its leadership doing such holy and special work at this time. I also want to thank them for putting together this fantastic panel. And without further ado, let me do a brief introduction of each of them, who I am blessed to know all of them and to call them all friends. We have with us, in no particular order, Kenny Albert, who is our play-by-play broadcaster for NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, and the Olympics on NBC. Noah Garden is the Executive Vice President of Major League Baseball. Tracy Wolfson is the lead sideline reporter for CBS Sports. Daniel Zausner is the Chief Operating Officer for USTA National Tennis Center. And Lee Igel is the Clinical Associate Professor at New York University's Tisch Institute for Global Sports. I want to thank you all for being here, and let's jump right to it if we can. So Danny, I'm going to start with you. And I want to ask you, are we going to have tennis in the end of August at the US Open? And if so, what's that going to look like? Since it will be the first official tennis event, I think, since COVID, if not including Novak Djokovic's special program that he put together.
Yeah, good evening. We'll put Novak's event to the side for a second. We had a press event back in the middle of June, and we announced that we're going to host the US Open this year with no fans. It required New York State approval, and we had to assume that the event was in June, even though it's the end of August, and the only way we can get the approval was with no fans. So we're going to rely on our broadcast revenues to try and host the US Open. I don't believe anything's going to change drastically. New York is in a much better position today than it was even 3 weeks ago, but it won't be in a good enough position to be what New York calls phase 4, where you could have fans in attendance. And we decided early on in the process that the concept of social distancing at the US Open is trying to do New Year's Eve in Times Square. You can't exactly do social distancing. So it was either no fans or no event. And so it'll be a US Open with no fans. And we're going to rely on our broadcast partners from over 200 countries to do an outstanding job to make the people watching all over the world feel like they're at the US Open.
So Noah, can I switch to you? Because I know Major League Baseball has signed a deal. They're going to start soon. And you're also planning, at least for the immediate start, that there'll be very few fans. What's that going to be like? What's it like? You know, I lived in Toronto when Joe Carter hit the walk-off home run to win the World Series. What's a walk-off home run going to look like without fans in the stands? What is the experience going to be like? And then I'd like to ask both of you, Noah and Danny, what implications does it have financially for tennis and for baseball?
Probably easier to start on the financial implications for me. You know, for us at baseball, you know, we sell roughly 70 million tickets a year. So it's a tremendous portion of our revenue, upwards of 40%. So, you know, it's a significant hit to us. That said, our broadcast revenues are important. And in this changing environment, there's going to be some other opportunities and different platforms and ways to produce games that I think will come into play certainly over the next 12 to 18 months as we work through the pandemic. You know, as far as fans in the stadium, you know, on TV, you probably We will find ways to produce games that have the same excitement that you're used to. And, I think we'll be very creative with our partners at Fox and Turner and all our local RSNs. We're working on those things right now. I think one of the things you take for granted, though, is what the fan noise does for the players on the field. And, listen, we're working through all of that right now. One that I hadn't contemplated myself was pitchers worried that when catchers are shifting behind, before each pitch, that without noise in the background, that the batter can actually tell the way the catcher's, shifting and what sort of pitch that may or may not be. And so, all those things from a competitive standpoint are things that we're looking into. And I think where we've landed for the moment is we're going to be piping sound into the stadiums. We have to. So that'll include crowd noise, less again for people that are consuming it on television and broadcast way, but really more for the players and just keep the integrity of the game and make sure that nobody has an unfair advantage by being able to hear things that they wouldn't normally do during the game.
Danny, what about you? What's that going to do financially for the U.S. Open?
So it's painfully dramatic. We're a small little nonprofit, as what people may not realize. And we call the U.S. Open our annual bake sale. It represents about 90% of our revenue. And with just broadcast revenue, we're losing all of our ticket revenue, represents about a third of our revenue. And our sponsors primarily pay us for the eyeballs on TV all over the world, although they do care a lot about the activation on site. So we're going to rely on the broadcast revenue and a small portion of the sponsorship revenue, and probably end up with about 30 cents on the dollar of what we would have made this year. It's enough to pay the players and to continue to say that we're hosting the Open in New York for over 100 years, but it's certainly not what we budgeted for this year.
Tracy, you're online, you are face-to-face, you are the face that most people see when they're watching football in particular, but you also do it for Ncaa. What precautions are you going to be taking as a professional when you get ready to do interviews, assuming the NFL season kicks off on time?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions when it comes to my role and actually all the broadcasters' roles. I think football, and Kenny knows this as well, we have the luxury of time right now. We don't know what's going to happen. There's a few months before we actually kick off the season, and so much could take place within that. So there's a lot of different conversations happening, whether it's with the NFL, whether it's with the teams, or whether it's with the broadcast partners, as to what our roles are going to be and how they're going to change. And I think it's going to change also according to what team you're covering. And they can use that also to their advantage in a sense of, let's take the Patriots, who are very, tight-lipped, and say, we don't want anyone because of COVID behind our bench, even though they don't want anyone ever behind their bench. I think my role is going to be, though, more important than ever, because sports is now going to be a news story as well, because you're going to, especially pregame, you're going to be talking all about COVID, and then you have social justice right now as well. So between those two issues, we're going to be reporting a lot, whether it's on the field, whether it's in the booth, whether it's outside the stadium, remains to be seen. And how we handle pregame, postgame interviews, I think it's going to be a case by case, or we're going to know a little bit more as we get closer. But I wouldn't be surprised if that part of it goes away. You can do an interview up in a booth and put a headset on a guy and not have someone, sweating all over you, standing, 2 feet away. So I think it's just really a waiting game right now. And I'm sure, Kenny, you probably feel the same way.
Yeah, I know Jim Nance has been doing that form of interview with golf, where they do it remotely. But Kenny, I want to ask you a version of that same question that I asked Tracy. I've been with you as you've called games, and I've seen your process from a Monday before a game all the way through to minutes before the game. And it's incredibly elaborate. I don't think most people appreciate how much energy and thought and detail you and Tracy, all these people who do this work, put into the game. Is that going to change for you because of COVID? Are you going to be able to do your pregame interviews, to sit with the team on Thursday, to sit with the main players for individual meetings? How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I don't think the preparation is going to change too much as far as the time that we put in. And Tracy will tell you as well that on a typical football week, we start on a Monday preparing for that Sunday game. And from Monday through Thursday, we're pretty much on our own at home, or if we're on the road for another event, doing that prep work. And then on Friday, we usually go in and go to the home team practice and then have the opportunity to sit down and talk to coaches and players, probably 4 or 5 people with the home team Friday and then with the visiting team on Saturday when they get in. If the NFL does start on time, I would think that at least this year we would probably do a lot of those meetings via Zoom as we're doing now or on the phone as opposed to in person. I know the sports that are starting up, that are scheduled to start up real soon, baseball in 2 weeks. I've read some of the media guidelines and criteria that have just been put into place due to COVID. And I know with baseball, which is going to be a little different than basketball and hockey because the games are going to be played at the Asheville home stadiums and the baseball teams will travel. With the NBA, they're only going to be in Orlando, and the NHL is going to be in 2 cities. So you'll have 12 teams in each city at the start. But from what I've heard, the baseball local announced teams, for example, John Sterling and Susan Waldman, Yankees radio, the Mets radio crew, the TV crews for the baseball teams, from what I hear, they're going to do the games from the stadium, the home games, but not the away games. They won't travel. I know with basketball, the national broadcasters are scheduled to be in Orlando, but the local team broadcasters will be back in their city calling the game off monitors. And I think hockey is going to be similar. So from a play-by-play standpoint, it will certainly be a lot different. And I don't know how football is going to work. Hopefully we're at the stadiums, but some of the crews might be in a studio somewhere. So that presents some challenges, onto its own, calling a game off a monitor versus calling the game in the stadium during normal times with the energy from the fans and, the enthusiasm. And I usually keep my headsets pretty high. I always joke that I'll probably lose my hearing in about 10 or 15 years, but I like to hear the crowd noise and the energy, and that helps me keep my energy and enthusiasm up during the course of a broadcast.
Well, I imagine that your spouses, Tracy and Kenny, are pretty happy if you're going to be doing this remotely, because I know what your travel schedules look like. But that indeed is a challenge. It's a conundrum, the travel part that I didn't even put into the equation of all of these challenges that we're talking about. Lee, you are a professor that encompasses all of these different sports. And you're a professor who in particular, I know from a lot of time that we spent together, have focused significantly on ethics and values of sports. And I'm curious how you think ethics and values in sports are going to be changing either positively, negatively, or there's still a jury to be coming back on with regard to COVID. How do you think this is going to address the issue of ethics in particular with regards to sports?
My work really is when sports business and the social impacts and ethics meet. What's happening now, you ask a really good question, because I think what we're seeing is actually, like so much else in the world, an acceleration of things that were already happening. And probably the biggest thing that we're seeing happening is a shift from the past almost 50 years of sports were focused on the economics stupid. And what we're seeing now is it's the society stupid. That's really where the impacts are going to happen. You're going to see more and more of a shift from a focus. While the money is always important and it's the driver of so much in sports, the focus on the social side and the social impacts is going to be beyond anything that we've seen before, or at least recognized before.
So that's a good question. I want to get to the social implications of sports in particular, because I think there has been just seismic shifts in the country during this pause. But before we do, I want to ask you, Ncaa, not speaking particularly to Major League Baseball, but including Major League Baseball, the financial hit that's going to be had by NHL, MLB, NBA, and NFL, are any franchises not going to be able to survive this blow?
I think an interesting way to look at it is it's just a seismic shift. In the short term, there's going to be a tremendous amount of pain as consumption changes, as fans, if we don't have fans, the implications of that. But that said, if you don't have fans in the ballpark, you have more consuming it in different ways, whether it's consuming it through their traditional broadcast or some alternative broadcasts that will be available out there. The model's just going to change. So in this environment, you're just going to need to be flexible, and you're going to need to be able to adapt to that environment and the way it changes. And it might be that, in 3 years, baseball in particular, that gets 40% of its revenue from, ticket sales, maybe that'll shift. Maybe if more eyeballs are watching it on TV, then those revenues will rise, and there'll be different ways to capture revenue. I certainly don't think anybody's in trouble. I think everybody's, while unprepared, has made, some very tough decisions and will find ways to weather the storm. But it's like any business, whether it's, sports or whether it's, whether it's Target or Walmart, as the environment changes, you need to adapt. And you've seen it in the sports world. There's been, teams that have had to furlough folks. There's people that, are not working that were working just a couple months ago. And while we hope that that's a short-term thing, you have to right-size businesses for the future and for what the revenue you see coming in. And, it could take, whether we have fans come back next year or not, it could take 3, 4, 5 years to get back to where we once were, till the community at large is comfortable, coming to games with, in those numbers. So you just don't know. You have to be flexible. You have to adapt. And I think from talking to folks at all the other leagues as well, everybody's prepared and working hard to achieve that.
Yeah, Rabbi, I just want to add that we're talking professional sports here, but while Noah brings it up, it's just interesting to think about the NCAA. And while I don't have an inside pulse on it, obviously I spent 10 years working at the SEC and or working, with the SEC. And then of course I went to the University of Michigan, and we know how much money a university makes off a football game. I mean, I think it could be up to $10 million a game, and to not have football, it will not only hurt the universities, but it will hurt the other sports at those universities. And we're seeing that certain universities having to close down sports because of it. And that's a shame. And then you throw in the amateur side of it, and the fact that these aren't, there's no unions, and they're just kids, and there's a lot, going on that side of sports when you talk, about the collegiate level.
So let me ask you a question about that then, Tracy. The average lifespan of an NFL player in particular is 3.3 years, right? And not every NBA player is Vince Carter, who's going to have a career that makes it eligible for a guy like me to get on the court. But does this pause, let's just say, let's say for whatever reason, we have a shortened MLB season, we have a shortened NFL season, if one at all. Is this going to play to strengths or to weaknesses? I can think of an obvious weakness in my Tampa Bay Bucks. They pick up Tom Brady. He doesn't have much more shelf life left. If he doesn't get to play this season, how beneficial will he be? How does that play out?
Yeah, but Tom Brady, if he doesn't play, he doesn't get hit. So, I mean, the longevity there could be just another year. I mean, he's in tremendous shape. And personally, I think the only thing that holds him back is the offensive line and how many hits he takes. And so I think he's a unique situation because he's playing so far into his career. If anything, I think it will help these guys, the wear and tear on them, especially those running backs and guys who, are out there for every play. It'll give them some time to rest and recover as long as they stay in shape. To me, that's one of the biggest concerns of returning is what were they doing during COVID? Now you have the professional stars that have these fancy gyms and trainers that can come in and they can do what they want. And then you have, the rookies right out and some of the other guys that aren't making that kind of money, or maybe don't have that motivation or that strength or that opportunity or to stay in shape. So I wonder, it's who's able to stay, at that prime level, if they're going to have to take a year off. And who's not, and then if you do return in the middle of the season or in September, I think that's going to change the playing field dramatically to say who is in shape, who is not in shape.
So,
Kenny, do you agree with that? Do you think that time is going to help people?
I think it could work both ways. And I agree with Tracy that for a player such as Tom Brady, and others, it can actually help because you have that extra time to rest. The wear and tear certainly did not take place as much as it might have during a normal off season with the OTAs, the off-season training activities, and then some of the other summer workouts. It's interesting when you look on a sport-by-sport basis. There were a couple of stories about NBA players early on during the pandemic. Steph Curry in particular did not have a basketball hoop at his house, and he actually had to order a hoop, a 10-foot hoop, as we see in so many driveways around the neighborhood. And it took him like 8 hours to put it together just to have a basket to shoot at.
He didn't even have someone to put it together for him.
I guess he had to put it together by himself. And as Tracy mentioned, some athletes do have elaborate gyms in their house or access to gyms. In the sport of hockey, you need a skating rink. And I know a number of players did some online skating, some roller skating in their neighborhoods, in their driveways. A number of them posted video. Rollerblading with their kids. There were even a couple of players who rollerbladed through their house just to keep in shape. And then players started to skate when some of the rinks opened up about 2.5 to 3 months in. In baseball, I read stories about Garrett Cole of the Yankees who moved into a house in Greenwich, Connecticut, and a couple of other players who lived in the neighborhood would come over to have catches, and they were 60 feet apart. So they were definitely following the social distance guidelines. But football is probably the toughest sport because you need, for a practice, whether it's a 7-on-7 or a full 11-on-11, you need other players. And we've heard about instances of players getting together as well. But I definitely chuckled at some of the stories about basketball players, Steph Curry, for example, who had to put together his own hoop.
That must have been a sight. Lee, you were going to chime in there.
Yeah, thanks. We're talking a lot about the physical part of it, but there's a huge mental and emotional component also. So get ready for that and watching athletes as they come back or choose not to come back. Some of the work we're doing, we do a lot of work in my department at NYU with mayors around the country. And one of the things that I'm leading is reopening of sports and recreation in cities around the country. And we're seeing this pandemic. It's certainly hitting everybody everywhere, but it's ripping through the Black community, and their family means something quite special. And we're already seeing lots and lots of athletes at the elite level who are making decisions that they probably wouldn't have made in almost any other time. They're staying home. They're worried about mom, dad, the kids, grandma. So it's we're going to see something different here because of this pandemic.
That's a very valuable point.
If there isn't football, or if the season is short, there's players that are older that decided to return. I wouldn't be surprised if you see more players decide to retire. Hey, you know what? I like it. I like this life right now. I'm healthy. I feel good. I'm spending time with my kids and my wife. I mean, so this could change a whole, as you say, a whole perspective going into the next season.
Danny, I want to ask you, when we talk about football and baseball, hockey, these are team sports. Tennis, like golf, a very individual sport. We talked about precautions that people like Kenny and Tracy will take on the field, and we talked about precautions that teams will take. What are you doing at USTA for players that are going to come out on the court for precautions? And what happens if we have a case like he had with Novak Djokovic, who admitted, I give him great kudos for admitting that it was a mistake, but who does, put into this arena the ability of spreading coronavirus?
Yeah, I have to tell you, when we looked at the whole plan that we've been working on for numerous months now, and we talked to all of the other leagues, I mean, clearly it's all about this bubble that we're creating, no different than what you're hearing about MLB and NHL and NBA and the others. We are putting all the players in one hotel, and we are basically quarantining them for 4 weeks. They'll go from the hotel to the tennis center and back, and that's all they'll do. The players traditionally stay in New York City and Manhattan. So we're taking them out of Manhattan, so there's no temptation whatsoever. 70% of these athletes are European, or they're outside of the US. And all they've heard about for the last 4 months is that US is the epicenter of the epidemic. New York is the epicenter of the epicenter, and Elmhurst, Queens, which is 3 miles from the tennis center, is the epicenter of everything going on. Now, the great news is that New York City is in the best place it's been since the pandemic began. But we got a lot of work there. When they come on site, We traditionally issue over 27,000 working credentials for the Open. This year, we're going to issue just about 2,500. So 1/10 of the working personnel will be on site. We're putting people on different tiers. Tier 1 is just the athletes and anyone that will actually interact with the athletes during the fortnight that they're there. Tier 2 are people who have to be on the physical site, but no interaction with the athletes. And Tier 3 are people like that work in a broadcast compound that don't even come inside the fence line. We'll be testing every athlete when they come off the plane and check into the hotel. They don't get a credential till after they test okay. They'll be tested every week as of right now. We've had a medical community like all the other leagues have been doing to make sure that we're taking the best advice that's available out there. And we're going to be testing everybody in Tier 2 as well. And the bottom line is we have to protect the players as best as possible. We're putting less ball persons on every court. Sadly, they'll be wearing gloves and shields and everything the ball people will be. It's not the ideal look, but I think everyone watching all over the world understand what's going on, and this is what's necessary.
I know how many meetings the synagogue has had for these conversations. I can only imagine for tennis, al achad kama v'kama, so much more. Noah, I want to ask you a tough question. I'm going to pose to everyone else as well, but I want to start with you because I think you represent what will be literally the first pitch in baseball. Before the anthem is played, have you prepared at all for any players that will choose to take a knee as a result of the social, I don't like the word unrest, I like the word awareness that has come to be as a result of the terrible murder of George Floyd, which really was a validation of Colin Kaepernick? And are you prepared as a league to address that? And Tracy, I'm coming to you next, and Kenny, what do you think is going to happen on that front when the anthems are played for the NFL, where Colin, was a player?
Listen, baseball, we view ourselves as a social institution. So as such, we have an obligation to listen to both our fans and our players. And frankly, both are hurting right now. The country is hurting. You don't have to be an expert to know that. I can tell you that as much time as we're spending right now on the health protocols and everything that entails, we're spending almost as much time on social justice, working with our players, talking to the players, talking to fans, and figuring out the right path forward. Right now, frankly, we're doing a tremendous amount of listening. I think you're going to see a lot of expression from players in all sports, including baseball, when we come back. You'll definitely see a relaxing of the rules. You've seen some stuff that the NBA's announced with jerseys. We will have stuff as well as players, look to express themselves on whether it's the shoes they wear, the jerseys they're wearing. They want to be heard. And I think that we're going to support them in that effort and create a platform for them to do that. And we're not going to mandate, certainly one way or another, whether you should or shouldn't stand or what you should or shouldn't wear or how you should or shouldn't feel. Again, our obligation here is to really listen to the fans and our players. That's the most important thing. And again, we're spending a tremendous amount of time on it. You'll hear more in the coming days of some of the things we're doing. But I think the other important thing for us as we've gone through this exercise is to make sure that what we're doing is something that will last, not something that, hey, we're doing something for opening day and then we're on to the season. This needs to be, the community at large is ready for change. And this needs to be something that we continue throughout not only this season, but seasons to come. And, you're starting to see that. You saw some stuff during the draft that our GMs did all by themselves. And again, you'll see a lot more stuff announced over the next few days. But again, we're taking a lead from fans and our players, listening very closely to them.
Kenny, what do you think is going to happen? I know you never prognosticate. That keeps you an honest broker. What do you think is going to happen when the first anthems are played on that first Thursday night game?
Well, never usually prognosticate, because if it's a national broadcast, as Tracy knows, we have to stay right down the middle. And although some of the fans on social media think that we root for a particular team or hate their team, that's not really the case. And I'm sure Tracy could speak to that, not only for herself, but a number of the play-by-play broadcasters and analysts she works with as well. But I agree with just about everything that Noah talked about. It's certainly a different time. From a television standpoint, I think we will certainly acknowledge and show during the national anthem if there are some players kneeling, as we did during NFL games a couple of years ago. But I think it might vary a little bit from sport to sport and network to network, because when you think about it, aside from the Super Bowl or Game 1 of the World Series, you often don't see the anthem on television because oftentimes the network's in commercial at that time. Usually the announcers will come on and set the scene and do the opening, and then throw to 2 minutes of commercial because that's a prime time to sell right before the start of the game. So I'm not sure how much that's going to change in the various sports. Noah certainly would have a better feel as far as baseball is concerned, but during the games where the anthem is shown on television, I'm sure we would certainly show what's going on and acknowledge that for sure.
And Rabbi,
Tracy.
to Kenny's point, I think that's why you're seeing some of the things that will happen. It's more lasting. It's not really, it's not about the anthem. That's why what players are wearing and the statements they're making in other ways will carry through for the whole game. I think Kenny's 100% right on that.
And I think, by the way, that does much more justice to the cause, right? And I think it's much harder to politicize that way. Tracy, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I was going to say, just touching on that topic was, a few years back with Colin Kaepernick, one of the things I felt the NFL should have done then is they had such a strict policy, and they still do, about what you can wear and what you could write on your shoes. They have 1 week, my cause, my cleats, that you can write your cause. Well, why can't you should be able to do that every week, right? I mean, these players have such an incredible platform, and they are role models to so many. Let's utilize that, and let's utilize that to make change for the better. And so I'm really happy that we're in this place and we have the opportunity. I really hope that we are able to get sports going for that, because we do have an unbelievable platform right now. And it would be a shame if the season is canceled and, the players can't go out there and show their cause and fight for justice. And I think the NFL is stepping up, and I think they're going to do, similar things to what Major League Baseball and the NBA are going to do as well. And we're going to broadcast it, where it might not be the anthem because of commercials, as Kenny said. That's exactly right. But we're going to broadcast. We're going to tell stories. We're going to talk about what, is being said, in the locker room or post game or outside. We're going to talk about what they're doing off the field, to help social justice. And I think that's part of, my role as a reporter, certainly to bring the stories, to everyone watching.
Lee, the coinciding of the social justice issues in sports is your sweet spot. How are we going to feel this from the spectator side of these changes, and how are ways that spectators can engage in this process as well?
That's a great question, because one of the things that sort of looking at is how much any of what's going on now is actually going to make a difference. Not that it isn't important, but the question is, how does it actually make a difference? The Black Power salute at the Mexico City Games in 1968, that's now this iconic photo. Nobody at the time knew that it happened. There's no social media. It wasn't popularized in the press. It wasn't until years later that there was an impact. I think you get, interestingly enough, the moment that sports and society really came together, and that sports came out of the toy department, is the Munich Olympics and the Munich Massacre. And when you look and see what happened what's happened in sports, the changes never come from cause marketing or community relations, or, like Noah was speaking to, just sort of, like we say, like light the candle and then move on at the ceremony. They've come really kind of organically. It's from people who had a larger mission, a larger interest in what they were doing, and they didn't actually really set out to do the results that we all know they're famous for. Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey coming together. There's, a wonderful movie about it, but the real story is even better, because Branch Rickey, the values that he held dear and that allowed him to do what he did as an executive in baseball, They were very personal values. He created the farm system because of personal values, not because he wanted to do good business. It was a byproduct. So I think the thing to look at and see is, writing messages on cleats, as Tracy was saying, it's important. There's an incredible platform, but we're going to need to see a lot more. We're going to need to see some real action to make a change. And sports, I really believe is going to do it, not because we're here talking about it, but one of the things we learned from the pandemic is, and Adam Silver with the NBA, in that moment when he announced the NBA was shutting down, we learned that sports is not essential. It's a non-essential service, but it's vital. And that's, look how many people paid attention and went, oh my goodness, the NBA is shutting down. This thing must be serious. And then all the other leagues, rightfully and understandably, followed suit, not because they were followed, they're taking a leading position going, we've got to do this the right way. That's the power of sport.
Well, speaking of values, I am a rabbi. This is sponsored by Federation, so I do want to put a little bit of a Jewish twist on this for a moment. And first, I just want to say that I have the blessing of knowing all of you. And for those of you that have tuned in, it doesn't matter if it's the Jewish Community Center, the Federation, our synagogue, any organization. Each one of these people have been so incredibly generous with their time, their resources, their connections that have all benefited our greater community. And when it comes to your generosity off the field and off of what you generally do, you're unparalleled, and all of our institutions in our community are stronger and healthier for it. And I just want to thank you all for that. So I know that the value of tzedakah and goodness is innate for all of you. It's natural for all of you. But I'm curious how Judaism has shaped your career in any ways and how that has come into application for you. Let's start with you, Ncaa.
Good question. I think the older I get, which I'm reminded of every day, the more reflective I get. And frankly, the closer I've become to my faith. I from a personal standpoint, I moved around a lot as a child. I didn't grow up in any one place for any specific amount of time. So I sort of missed out on growing up, being a member of that one synagogue, and going through life with those connections. That really didn't happen to me till much later. I can tell you that, most recently, obviously my time spent here in North Jersey and Tenafly, I've gotten very close to the community, and it means a lot to me. And I can tell you that, my faith is shared by not only the folks on this panel, but so many other friends that I have within the community. And it's that faith in those people that I continually turn to for advice and to help me through my own difficult times, whether it's personal or professional. And I think the ability to be a member of a community like that, that's so open and welcoming, has, again, on the one side, helped me personally, but also continues to, whether it's listening to your sermons over the holidays, it's all a matter of continuing to educate yourself and to grow. And I think that that's one of the things that's been most important to me as I continue to be active locally.
Danny, has being Jewish influenced the way that you run operations for USTA?
I don't think there's any question. I've only had 3 jobs in my entire 35+ year career. Each one of them has offered me an opportunity to build a community, as Noah is describing, and that community, both inside my faith and out, has allowed me to have a team of people surrounding me that's just made me a better person, and also be, as a team, incredibly successful. As a Jewish husband, I will tell you that I owe my wife as much credit as I do my skill set for being successful in my work, because she just allows me to think outside the box and not be home. She refers to herself as a U.S. Open widow on an annual basis for 60 days. So without that kind of support, you can't be successful at all.
What about you, Tracy? How has being Jewish influenced who you are and how you do your reporting?
I think first off, when I was younger, growing up, elementary school, I didn't have any Jewish friends. I lived in an area that was not Jewish at all. And I did attend a synagogue and then wound up going to school in New City, New York, which is a large Jewish population. But I think the independence that I felt when I was younger, in so many different ways, how I was a little bit, different, has strengthened me and given me that independence that you need in my job, traveling all alone by yourself, being out there on an island doing an interview or, talking to a camera while, millions of people are listening. I think getting up on the Bima has really helped in terms of when I was a kid. I loved attending Hebrew school. I enjoyed every minute. I loved being up there. I loved singing prayers. I loved doing my bat mitzvah. And I think that, just really bred me being, in front of people, talking in front of people, being confident in front of people. And then I think the idea of family. I mean, one of the best things and things I love about Judaism is how close family is, and the Jewish holidays, the high holidays that we all get to spend together. And I'm on the road so often from my family during those times, which is extremely difficult for me. But I have another whole family that I work with, and I treat them just that way. And that's how it has to be, or else we would not have the success that we do. So I think those few things have really made me, who I am today, and has certainly helped in my career.
Kenny, I know you're a natural in the broadcast box. Not as comfortable as Tracy on the Bima. I know from officiating at your two daughters' bat mitzvah. How has being Jewish influenced who you are and the career path that you've taken?
Well, first of all, I'd love to see the tapes of Tracy up there and compare. But as you know, similar to Tracy, I'm on the road probably 46 or 47 out of 52 weekends every year. So you probably don't see me as often as you see my family. And my wife and kids certainly hold things together in that regard. They see you a lot more frequently than I do. But I do often think back to my bar mitzvah. Hard to believe it was 39 years ago now on Long Island, back in February of 1981. And what a memorable day that was. And then, of course, as you well know, my two daughters' bat mitzvahs in recent times. So it's certainly a big part of our lives. But I have to give my wife and family credit for leading the way, just due to the nature of our schedules. And I was pretty comfortable up there. I may have had one or two mishaps, but it wasn't that bad, was it?
You weren't bad at all. You were great, but I don't think you were as eager as Tracy to be. I do remember when you lifted the Torah up that I held back used all of my restraint to not say, it's up and it's good.
I have to say, you did a terrific job when you visited the broadcast booth in Tampa. Probably better than I did up on the Bima.
Well, that was one of the highlights of my life. It's up there. Lee, I know the answer to this question because I know the day school that you went to. I know your parents. I know how much Judaism has influenced your path and your career. Talk, for those who are tuned in today, a little bit about the intersection of where ethics and sports really finds its momentum for you.
Without going too late, I wish you'd answer it because you'd answer it shorter and greater depth than I would. And you got a professor here, so it's 3 minutes or 3 hours and nothing in between. But the really short piece of it is it provides structure and a sense of values, a sense of community, all the things that sort of nodding along as everyone else here was speaking. But I think also what as I've gone on in my work, come to discover that it also really helps me understand sort of with a way of thinking and to come around to questions about, almost what isn't being done, what aren't people seeing. And so when everybody's going in a certain direction, when ethics is, it's not situational. They're the same everywhere you go. Values are values, and I think all the things that being Jewish and Judaism teaches and relates just goes right in there. The tough thing is to help people in organizations figure the way to what they usually know is the right thing to do, but hit up against realities and how we balance those things. I've just discovered, again, more as time has gone on, that having a sense of structure and value in the way of thinking is enormously powerful.
I just want to tell you all that I'm proud to know you as a community member and a rabbi, and those were my favorite of all your answers, and all of them were amazing, just amazing. I don't think I've ever had the chance to talk to you about those individually. I want to open up the field to those who are tuned in, who want to ask some questions. There are a few different people who have sent them my way. And I'm going to begin with a question from Melanie Schickler. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And it's addressed to you, Tracy. Melanie writes, I'm a Newhouse student studying sports broadcasting, and I've always looked up to you as a strong, powerful woman in a male-dominant field. As a young, aspiring journalist, what is the most important factor in standing out in comparison to others when seeking a job?
Well, first off, I would say thank you, Melanie. I'm flattered and I appreciate that. I would say, know your stuff, honestly. I mean, we're going to be scrutinized because we are women and we're in a male-dominated industry. And so if you go out there and you know what you're doing and you know what you're saying and you've practiced and you've learned and you've researched and you've done your work and you've put in the hard work and time and effort, then you're going to be just fine out there, because then there's nothing for anyone to scrutinize. And you're just another person, reporting sports, not a male or a female. I think a big thing is, just go about and do your business. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't worry about how many followers you have on Instagram or social media or who's watching or who's not. Just go and do your job. And I think you'll be successful. The other thing I say is be versatile, be willing and able to do everything out there, because we all might want to, report on the NFL, but there are a lot of steps there. And be willing to, I did rodeo, I did figure skating, I did auto racing. I don't know how to change a tire, but I spent 5 years covering the American Le Mans series. So just be willing to do everything and anything to get that experience. And then finally, it's so easy. Just be a good teammate, good person, great to work with, and you will have longevity in this business.
Great answer. I want to ask this next question, which comes from an unidentified questioner to Danny and to Ncaa. Is there any chance that some of the outsized salaries will start coming back to earth because of these unprecedented times and because of the pinch that you're feeling because of ticket sales?
I'm happy to jump in first. Baseball is a free market system, right? We don't have a salary cap. We have an ability for, players to go out and for clubs to pay them what they think they're worth and what they can afford. And I think that, again, it's too early to tell what the overall result is going to be from a financial impact. Certainly short term, we're going to take a little bit of a hit. But as everybody on here and listening and watching probably knows, the demand for sport has never been higher. All folks want is to be able to watch their favorite team, to be able to watch sports on the weekend. And so, before we count that out and we're really going to see how those numbers end up being, because I think they're going to be a lot higher than we imagine. And then again, it takes time for a business to shift from the economics of the past to the economics of the future. And, but I do think that demand's never been higher. So I do think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, a lot of players, each and every year. I think it's going to be just dependent on how well the clubs are doing. And certainly in the short term, we're under pressure. So I think that pressure will be felt everywhere across the board. But long term, I'm pretty confident on the space and the direction that we're all headed. And I think there'll be a lot of success of the future. Sport's not going away. And, it's something that we all count on to sort of take, whether it's in my case, 3 hours off of your daily day to enjoy your favorite team and relax your mind. So, I think in the short term, a little pressure, but long term, I think we're fine.
Danny, what about you? Is the purse changing at all for the winner of the USTA this year?
So that's a great question. So even with just this 30% of the revenues this year, we made a conscientious decision that we were not going to go to the players and ask them for any relief. We don't have a collective bargaining agreement. We're not with leagues that, represent the players. What we do each year is say, here's what the purse is, and then we hope they want to apply to be involved in the event. If you put sports to the side for 1 second, I could tell you that all my friends in the concert promoter world will tell you that there's going to be a complete reset. That doesn't mean for concert fans that all of a sudden ticket prices are going to be in half, but the artists are used to getting right? Basically between 95 to 100% of the gross on the ticket sales. And all the promoters feel that they cannot survive unless there's a complete reset in that world. So I don't think to Noah's point, I don't think you're going to see that in the major league sports, but you will see it on the entertainment side for sure.
Lee, Washington Redskins, are they going to change their name? And if so, will that also mean the change of the name for the Cleveland Indians and for Arrowhead Stadium? And what factors will come into that decision besides Dan Schneider?
Washington Redskins, dead brand. Not as much value in it as there used to be, although there are plenty of fans who would argue with that. But I think broadly, it's not there. And they've got an even bigger issue because they want the franchise wants a new stadium, and one of the sticking points is a name change. So, no name change, no new stadium. I think you're going to start to see some of the economics come in and hit up against the social. And there'll be a change there. The Cleveland Indians, I know we could pitch it to Noah, but to no go tonight, looks like they would. But it's interesting, and this is, I think, one of the fascinating things about sport is that the Atlanta Braves are not looking, at least so far, to be changing their name. Although I'm trying to read Noah's face at the same moment to see if he knows something that the rest of us don't. But I think you've got the same kind of thing going on that we were talking about earlier, which is there are name changes, and name changes are important. But if they're going to do anything, they've got to resonate beyond just a name change. And I think lessons learned from team names of the past, they better do better than just be in the moment or of the moment. We need names that last.
I think the Washington Wizards would have a word to say about that as well. Tracy, you had mentioned before that, the cause for cleats or cleats for cause, I forgot how it's referred to. One of the things I struggle with significantly is the idea that came from Voltaire that even that which is abhorrent to you, I will fight for my dying day for one's right to say it. And just today, I believe Deshaun Jackson from the Eagles came out with a very anti-Semitic tweet that was influenced by Louis Farrakhan, who I would claim has a significant anti-Semitic bias. Should there be a censorship on what people are putting on their cleats or putting on their jerseys? And if so, what group censors that?
Well, I think it's the NFL. I do think you're going to have to get what you want to put out there approved. But I do think, people have freedom of speech. I think what Deshaun Jackson said was completely ignorant. And, I don't want to get into it, but obviously we all know, if you want to just use the word dumb, not smart. And we know he is smart. He went to Cal. But with that being said, and I see the question, out there and how it reflects on the NFL when someone like him comes out and says that. I don't think it does. I think that's a one person, and you can't lump him with everyone else in the NFL. So I don't think there needs to be a complete, complete reaction to it in the sense of let the Eagles handle it, maybe the NFL handle it case by case. And I'm sure they will. And we already saw what the Eagles came out and said. And so, but I do think, look, there is going to be, if you want to write stuff on your shirt or on your shoes, well, let's just make sure it's appropriate. I mean, I think that certainly is going to be, and that's okay. I think that's how it should go, at least as long as they let that, people speak what they want to say, and the NFL has to come out and say, okay, well, this is appropriate and this is not, and this makes sense. That's okay. But give them the opportunity to voice their opinion and their platform. Let's put it that way.
So the next question is for Noah and Kenny, and it's for hockey and baseball respectively, but applies to all sports. Baseball, my understanding is correct, not having minor league games. What's the farm system going to look like when a player gets injured in hockey or gets injured in baseball if there's no minor league sport happening? Kenny, let's start with you and then go to Noah.
Well, in hockey, according to everything I read in the agreement that is out there for the players to now ratify, hockey teams are going to bring, I think it's 31 players with them into the bubble. During regular season play, during normal times, it's 23. and 20 play in a particular game, 18 skaters and 2 goaltenders, and then you have 3 extra players who are scratches for that game. So they're going to be allowed 31 players and extra goaltenders as well. So I know in baseball, Ncaa, I think there were 60 players on the rosters. Is that right? For this, if you want to call it, summer training camp?
Yeah, and we're going to continue with a pretty large taxi squad. I mean, the idea, again, is we're trying to reduce as many contacts as possible. So I think, and we have a compressed season, and still think, a lot of people think 60 games is a lot for baseball. It's just, as you know, a fraction. So I think as folks get hurt, one, we'll have a pretty big taxi squad for teams to pull from. But then when that player comes back, they'll come back to that taxi squad in the, in the bubble that we're creating, which isn't really a bubble, but is reducing contact as much as we possibly can and continue the testing and to make sure everybody stays safe. So, it is definitely going to look a little different, but on the other end of the spectrum, there's going to be a lot of people probably getting an opportunity to, to get out on the field that wouldn't normally get out in a normal year based on, the flow of injuries and otherwise. So, I think it's going to create an opportunity as well for us.
So final question, I make it potpourri, whoever answers or multiple answers. Will this season forever have an asterisk next to it? So when we crown an NBA champion, when there's a Major League Baseball World Series winner, when the NFL has a Super Bowl, will there forever be an asterisk next to it, or will people records be shattered, and how will that look?
Yeah, I don't think it will, and I'll give a couple of examples. The 1981 Dodgers. Does anybody remember that was a strike-shortened season? Super Bowl 17 back in the 1982 NFL season. Teams only played 9 regular season games that year. The Redskins won the Super Bowl. Do the fans in Washington think of that as a shortened season or as a Super Bowl championship season?
Kenny's right. I mean, you see T-shirts, people, my team won the pennant this many times. There's no asterisk. You don't remember if this was a shortened season or not. Certainly for the next few years, fans are going to know and they'll remember and they'll recall it. But our kids won't, depending on their age. And, it'll just be another championship season. And I think that's one of the things that, that we're hoping to accomplish for all sports.
And even though the regular season is going to be shorter, especially in baseball, teams are still going to have to go through the same playoff format. So in hockey or basketball, they're going to have to win 16 games. In baseball, they'll have to go through the same 3 rounds. So as far as the playoff setup, it won't be much different.
Let's hope.
Your champions.
Let's hope they finish the seasons, right? And we have
Let's hope.
championships and champions to crown.
Well, that's a perfect word to end this on. You are all amazing champions. It is an honor to know you individually and to know you from your work that you do, which is really amazing. And you've given everyone this fantastic glimpse into how much energy and thoughtfulness you put into your craft and how lucky we all are to be the beneficiaries of that craft. Before we close, I want to hand off, which is the appropriate word, to my dear friend, the first president of Temple Emmanuel, still sticking with the theme, Tracy, Steve Rogers, who's going to share some closing remarks. But before he does, I just want to thank you, Kenny, you, Tracy, you, Danny, you, Noah, and you, Lee, for giving us an amazing, amazing evening that was really thoughtful and provoking and engaging.
Thank you, Rabbi. It truly was a great and informative evening. I remember when you got to Temple Emmanuel 13 years ago, one of the very first things that you did was institute the Temple Emmanuel Fantasy Football Draft. True story. And I remember driving home that night 13 years ago with my then 10-year-old who said, "What a great rabbi. He's almost like a normal person." So we thank you for your expertise, and you're getting your just reward as soon as the season starts, since your beloved Buccaneers got the GOAT and the Gronk, which I know you're excited about both. So thank you very much for moderating, and thank you to our panel of experts, Kenny, Noah, Lee, Tracy, and Daniel. We appreciate your generosity of time and expertise. Finally, thank you to Federation for all it does each and every day for our community. Although sometimes it's hard to see directly the impact that Federation makes, I can assure you that this community would be in deep trouble without the resources, access, and influence of Federation. I'm a proud donor, and I invite you to make your gift today. One programming note: on Monday, August 24th, Federation has rented out the drive-in movie theater at Demarest Farms, and will be showing a fantastic movie about the Israeli Olympic baseball team, which should really have, which really has done fantastically well. So between that team and our panel, whoever said Jews in Sports is a thin book was totally wrong. Check out Federation's website for more details and to register for that movie. Thank you again. Stay safe. Continue participating in Federation's virtual events, and have a good night. Thanks.